Your brain is already different, not because of what you chose, because of what you got used to without noticing. This didn't start today. It started the first time you reached for an answer before your mind had the chance to struggle toward one. And since then, it hasn't stopped. You are being shaped, right now, every single day. And the worst part, you probably think you're using it safely. Everyone is affected, no exceptions. The era itself is the force, and no one is standing outside of it. The only difference between people is the speed of the damage. And that speed, it's accelerating. For some, it's already visible. Weak minds collapse fast, attention gone, thinking shallow, dependency raw and exposed. That kind of destruction is loud, obvious, easy to see from the outside. But you're not that person. And that's exactly the problem. Intelligent minds don't fall apart visibly. They compensate. They rationalize. They stay articulate, sharp, convincing, while something underneath quietly erodes. You still sound like yourself, but the depth that made you dangerous, it's already thinning. Security is a myth. Awareness is not immunity. And the higher your intelligence, the more invisible the erosion, and the further it goes before you feel it. Today you'll understand exactly how this is already happening inside your mind, and why the smarter you are, the harder it is to see it coming. Don't click away. This is about you. There's a moment most people never catch. It happens fast, almost invisible. Right before you start thinking, you open a tab. Not because you searched for something specific, because your mind, without asking permission, already decided it didn't want to work alone anymore. That decision happened beneath awareness, beneath intention, beneath anything you'd call a choice. That's not a habit. That's a reconfiguration. Think about the last time you faced a complex question, a real one, the kind that used to make you sit with discomfort, turning the problem over and over until something clicked from the inside. Now notice what actually happens. Before the discomfort even fully arrives, you've already moved. You consulted before you thought. You summarized before you understood. You asked for structure before you gave yourself the chance to build one. And it felt completely natural. That's what makes it so precise. The shift didn't announce itself. It didn't feel like loss, and it felt like progress. Like you were finally working smarter instead of harder. But here's what that story quietly omits. The friction you eliminated wasn't inefficiency. It was the process itself. It was where the real thinking happened, where meaning was constructed, not just retrieved. Speed replaced struggle, and struggle, as uncomfortable as it always was never the enemy. It was the mechanism. Your mind used to reach, really reach, before finding ground. That reaching was building something invisible but real. Neural pathways deepening under tension, cognitive capacity growing precisely because the work resisted you, and you pushed back anyway. Now the reach lasts half a second. Your brain already anticipates the catch, and with every assisted answer, every shortcut that felt justified, every moment you moved before the discomfort could teach you anything, the threshold dropped a little further. Notice how fast you move toward assistance now. Notice how little internal resistance there is before you do. That instinct didn't arrive all at once. It was installed gradually, exchange by exchange, until it became the default. The shift already happened. You're living inside it right now. There was a time when not knowing the answer meant something had to happen inside you. Not outside, inside. Your mind had to stretch toward something it couldn't immediately reach. And in that stretching, in that uncomfortable, unglamorous, often frustrating process, something was being constructed that no shortcut could ever replicate. Ambiguity wasn't the obstacle. Ambiguity was the training ground. Every time you sat with a problem that refused to resolve quickly, your focus deepened. Not because you were disciplined, because you had no other option. The answer wasn't available on demand, so your brain had to build the road toward it. And building that road was the point. The destination mattered far less than what your mind became in the process of reaching it. Frustration consolidated memory. That's not a metaphor. It's neuroscience. When retrieval is difficult, when your brain has to work to surface something, the encoding becomes stronger. The knowledge lands differently. It roots. It connects to other things, creating density, creating depth, creating the kind of intelligence that doesn't just recall information, but knows what to do with it. Struggle was never punishment. It was architecture. And then, gradually, the struggle became optional. Think about what that means at the level of your cognition. Every time resistance disappeared before it could do its work, A layer of depth went with it. Not dramatically, not in a way you'd notice on any given Tuesday, but consistently, session by session, query by query, the construction slowed. You didn't lose intelligence. You stopped building it. There's a profound difference between a mind that knows things and a mind that was forged through the process of figuring them out. One retrieves, the other creates, one depends on what's available, the other generates what doesn't exist yet. Your intelligence was built on resistance. And resistance, for the first time in human history, is something you can now permanently avoid. That's not progress. That's a very quiet kind of loss. Here's what no one tells you about intelligent people and dependency. It doesn't look like dependency at all. It looks like optimization. Weak minds fall visibly. The signs are loud, shallow thinking, zero tolerance for complexity, an almost childlike need for instant answers. You can spot it from across the room. But intelligent minds? They don't fall. They adjust. They reframe. They construct an elegant narrative around every behavior that might otherwise look like erosion. And they do it so convincingly that even they believe it. That's not a flaw. That's the very sophistication working against them. You use AI to sharpen your thinking, to move faster, to handle the volume of what your life demands. You're not outsourcing, you're leveraging, and you still sound like yourself. Articulate, nuanced, structured. The people around you aren't noticing any decline because there's no visible decline to notice. You still sound intelligent. That's the camouflage. But look closer, not at the output, at the process. When did you last develop an argument from the ground up without any external scaffolding? When did you last write something raw, unassisted, before it was shaped by a suggestion that wasn't yours? When did you last sit inside an idea long enough for it to become fully yours? Not retrieved, not refined, but genuinely originated? Because there's a version of you that exists right now that is performing intelligence without fully exercising it, producing results without building capacity, moving fast through a process that used to build depth, and calling that efficiency. And the most dangerous part isn't the dependency itself. It's that you asked for help improving an argument you hadn't even finished constructing yet. The thought was still forming, still fragile, still capable of becoming something original, and you handed it over before it had the chance. Sophisticated dependence doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like working smarter. That's exactly why it's the hardest kind to see, and the hardest kind to stop. Your brain is not loyal to your ambitions. It's loyal to efficiency. And right now, it's being trained, not by you, but by the pattern of rewards you've been feeding it. Every quick answer, every instant structure, every moment of resolution that arrived before the discomfort could fully land. Your brain registered all of it, tagged it, filed it as the preferred path forward. This is not philosophy. This is neurobiology. Dopamine, the system your brain uses to motivate behavior, doesn't reward achievement. It rewards anticipation of reward. And when answers arrive fast, when resolution is always one prompt away, that system begins compressing. The threshold for what counts as worth the wait drops, quietly, incrementally, until deep, slow, uncertain thinking stops feeling productive and starts feeling like a waste. Your brain optimizes for convenience, always has. But convenience has never been this available before. What follows is a cascade most people never connect to its source. Tolerance for ambiguity decreases, not because you've become less capable, but because your system has been recalibrated toward faster resolution. Deep processing shortens. The kind of thinking that used to sustain itself for hours now fragments after minutes. Attention doesn't collapse dramatically. It just becomes expensive in a way it never used to be. And neuroplasticity, the very mechanism that makes human intelligence extraordinary, follows the same rule it always has. What you use grows, what you don't use recedes. There are no exceptions. No intelligence level high enough to override it. No awareness sophisticated enough to exempt you from it. If you think you're the exception, that thought itself is the first symptom. Convenience is not neutral. Every frictionless interaction leaves a biological trace. Every time your brain received the answer before the struggle could complete itself, the circuitry for deep processing got slightly less reinforcement. Not broken, just quieter, just a little less automatic than it used to be. The science isn't alarming because it's extreme. It's alarming because it's gradual, And gradual changes are the ones that compound in silence until the distance becomes irreversible. You believe you're in control, and that belief, more than anything else, is what makes this so effective. Because control isn't something you lost suddenly. It's something that got redefined, slowly, in ways that always felt reasonable, rational, even responsible. Every time you reached for assistance, there was a perfectly legitimate reason. The deadline was real. The complexity was genuine. The decision to optimize made complete sense in the moment. And moments are all we ever actually live inside. That's how the illusion sustains itself. Not through deception, through justification. I only use it when I need to. That sentence has passed through the mind of everyone who has ever developed a dependency they didn't recognize as one. Because need is not a fixed line. It's a threshold, and thresholds move. What required assistance last month is what you now reach for automatically. What felt like an exception became a default so gradually that the transition left no visible seam. Control feels strongest right before dependency. That's why the most confident minds are often the last to notice the shift. Think about the moments you feel most confident about your relationship with these tools. The moments you'd push back hardest against the idea that something has shifted. That confidence, that specific, articulate, well-reasoned confidence, is itself a product of the adaptation. Your mind learned to explain its new patterns with the same intelligence it used to apply to original thought. And now test it directly, not in theory, in practice. After this video ends, try something uncomfortable. Open a blank page and build an idea from nothing. Start something from zero. No assistance, no outline suggested by anything outside your own mind. No prompt refined by an external structure. Just you, a blank space and a complex idea that needs to be developed from its raw, unformed beginning. Notice what happens in the first 60 seconds. Notice the pull. Notice how unfamiliar that particular silence has become, and how quickly something in you moves to fill it with outside input. You didn't lose control in one moment. You delegated it incrementally to a system that never asked for permission, and never had to. You think more than ever, and yet something feels thin. That sensation, vague, persistent, difficult to name, is not burnout. It's not stress. It's not the weight of everything you're carrying. It's something more specific and more unsettling than any of those familiar explanations. It's thinning. Notice what reading feels like now. A long article, genuinely dense, demanding sustained attention across multiple connected ideas. How far do you get before something in you shifts? Before the pull towards something faster, something more digestible, something that doesn't require you to hold so many threads simultaneously? The words are still there. The capacity to decode them hasn't disappeared. But the patience that used to make deep reading feel natural, that's the thing that's quietly changed. This is not burnout. It's thinning. Your attention now lives in a different rhythm. Shorter cycles, faster transitions, a constant low-level alternation between inputs that never fully stops, even when you want it to. You switch between tasks, not always because the work demands it, but because sustained focus on a single thing has started to feel, in some hard-to-define way, like deprivation. And beneath that rhythm, something subtler, a growing anxiety that has no precise object, not fear of anything specific, just a diffuse restlessness that arrives whenever the pace slows, whenever silence lasts too long, whenever a problem refuses to resolve on the timeline your nervous system has been trained to expect. You feel like you're thinking constantly, and you are. But thinking constantly and thinking deeply are not the same thing, and the distance between them has been growing without a single dramatic moment to mark its expansion. You sense it in conversations where you used to go further, in ideas that arrive but don't develop, in the strange feeling of having processed enormous amounts of information and still feeling, somewhere underneath it all, like you haven't quite landed anywhere. You think a lot, but you know, if you're honest, that you're touching more and inhabiting less. That's not a productivity problem. That's what fragmentation feels like from the inside. There's a cruel irony buried inside high intelligence, and most people who have it never see it coming. Weak minds show the damage early. The erosion is fast, visible, almost merciful in its transparency, because when the signs appear that quickly, there's still time to recognize them for what they are. The collapse announces itself. It creates friction. It creates alarm. And alarm, however uncomfortable, is a mechanism of protection. Intelligent minds don't get that warning. They compensate too well. Every gap that opens gets covered by vocabulary, by analytical framing, by the sheer force of a mind that has spent decades learning how to appear coherent under pressure. The articulation remains intact long after the depth beneath it has begun to hollow. The performance of intelligence outlasts the substance of it, and because the performance is so convincing, neither the world nor the person inside it registers what's actually happening. The smartest minds don't notice the erosion until the depth is gone. If someone came to your mind while hearing this, the person who prides themselves on being too smart to be influenced, send this to them, not to accuse them, to wake them up. And by then the timeline has changed entirely, because intelligent minds don't just fall slower, they fall from higher ground. The decline is longer, quieter, more insidious, but the distance between who they were and who they're becoming is vast in a way that a sudden, visible collapse never produces. Think about what it means to lose depth gradually, not to lose facts. Facts can be relearned. To lose the capacity for the kind of thinking that produced your best work, the thinking that surprised even you, the ideas that arrived from somewhere that felt genuinely interior, genuinely yours, forged in silence and sustained effort, and the specific quality of mind that resisted easy answers. That capacity doesn't disappear in a moment you can point to. It recedes, quietly, consistently, until one day you reach for it, really reach, and find that the distance to it has become unexpectedly large. You won't feel the erosion while it's happening. You'll feel it when it's already done. And that gap, between when it starts and when it registers, is exactly where intelligent minds lose the most. This is the part where most content tells you everything is fine, that awareness is enough, that simply knowing about a problem creates distance from it. It doesn't. Awareness without action is just a more sophisticated form of the same passivity that allowed the erosion to begin. You can understand every mechanism described in this video with perfect clarity: the neural adaptation, the dopamine compression, the fragmentation, the illusion of control, and still wake up tomorrow having changed nothing. Understanding is not resistance, it never was. So here's what resistance actually looks like. It looks like thinking without assistance. Not occasionally, not when you feel inspired. Deliberately, consistently, as a practice that you protect with the same seriousness you'd give anything else that matters. It looks like writing before the structure exists, before the outline appears, before anything outside your own mind has shaped the direction. Raw, uncomfortable, uncertain, and yours. It looks like tolerating ambiguity long enough for something original to emerge from it, not solving the discomfort immediately, sitting inside it, letting the tension do what tension was always designed to do. Force depth. It looks like training focus the way you'd train anything that atrophies without use. Deliberately, progressively, with full awareness that the resistance you feel is not a sign that something is wrong, it's a sign that something is working. If you don't train your mind, someone else will train it for you. That's not a warning about AI. It's a warning about abdication, about what happens when the most powerful cognitive instrument you will ever possess gets handed, piece by piece, to a system optimized for your comfort rather than your growth. You don't need to reject these tools, but you need to be larger than them. You need to remain the architect and not the output, because the version of you that thinks without assistance, writes without scaffolding, and sits with hard questions long enough to produce something genuinely original, that version is still there, but it needs to be chosen, actively, and it needs to be chosen now. It's happening to you, not as a possibility, not as a future risk worth monitoring, as a current reality, already in motion, already leaving traces in the way you think, reach, and resist. The question was never whether this era would affect you. The question is how much ground you've already given without realizing it. And here's what makes that question so important. Intelligence doesn't protect you. It never did. It only made the erosion quieter, slower, and far more difficult to detect until the distance becomes undeniable. The brightest minds in this era aren't failing loudly. They're fading precisely, and the precision of that fade is what makes it so devastating. You are not immune. No one is. But immunity was never the goal. The goal is consciousness, the choice, made deliberately, repeatedly, against the grain of every convenience this era offers, to remain the author of your own thinking, to protect the capacity that makes everything else you do worth doing. Every time you think without reaching, every time you write before the structure exists, Every time you sit inside discomfort long enough for something real to surface, you are reclaiming something. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently in the only direction that matters. If you value your mind, start protecting it today, not tomorrow, not after the next project, the next deadline, the next moment that feels more convenient for difficult choices. Today, because the erosion doesn't pause while you decide. If this video reached something in you, leave it in the comments. How often do you think without assistance? Not as a confession, as a starting point. And if you want to go deeper into what makes a mind genuinely powerful in this era, the video on intelligence waiting for you next will take you further than you expect. AI won't destroy intelligent minds, but intelligent minds that stop resisting will.